Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of La Coalición. I'm really happy to be here for this episode with two amazing women that are going to be with us for this episode on Women's History Month and celebrating Women's History today with Lizbeth and Kimi. Why don't you introduce yourselves, both of you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizbeth. I'm the Deputy Director of Programs here at ICIJ. I am an immigrant woman from Chiapas, Mexico, who migrated here with, actually, my tias brought me when I was 2 years old, and I've been under the DACA program since then.
My name is Kimi Maru. I'm a member of Nikkei Progressives, which is a community organization that's multi-generational and all volunteer. We're located in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, and we formed back in 2016, right after Trump was elected. For myself, I'm a Sansei woman that's third generation Japanese American. My parents are Nisei, second generation, and my grandparents were the immigrants who came here from Japan in the early 1920s.
Awesome. Thank you for coming all the way to the IE.
Sure, no problem.
So I want to get started with just a fun question. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And I want to say that being a woman, it already is kind of a superpower. But what would you say would be a good superpower to have?
I kind of thought about this before, and I was telling Kimmy that my superpower would be to clone myself. Like, sometimes I think, I'm in my mommy era, so I have two kids, and when I'm, doing chores and working at the same time, I'm always like, man, I wish I had more hands. But then I think about it, I'm like, no, that's not enough. I need to like literally clone myself, clone my brain, my body, and like my heart and everything so that I can do everything I want to possibly do. And I think also part of me, like when I'm at work, I wish I was with my baby. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could just clone myself and I could like be cuddling him, but also be working. So I've been thinking about that a lot. So yeah. And then also with work, I'm like, learning how to explain to staff about, certain things I have in my brain. And I'm like, man, I wish I could clone my brain and just like put it on other people so they can understand me better. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I want to clone myself. I hope that's a superpower. I don't know if I would clone other people, but definitely like clone myself.
That is such a director thing to wish for. Such a mom thing to wish
I
for.
know. That's why I said, disclaimer, I'm in my mommy era. Yeah.
That's so cool. What about you, Kimmy?
I guess for myself, this is kind of personal, but I would want to be a healer because there's been a lot of people I know recently who have passed away from cancer or from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and diabetes. So I would want to be a healer to try to heal people who are suffering from these really horrible diseases because too many people are dying. And right now, there's no cure for any of those diseases. So that would be my superpower.
Yeah.
That's so cool that both of you wish for powers that can not only be of service to you, but to other people.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about both of you.
Yeah, that's why we're friends. I guess we have the same like values in that we always want to help other people. I don't know. For me, it's like maybe because I'm the oldest the oldest daughter, immigrant daughter. That's always like a stereotype, right? That we like want to fix everything. We want to help everyone. So that's where it comes from. And I know we're going to be talking a little bit more about immigrant women, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can lead with that. And, speaking of immigrant women and Women's History Month, I want to know what does this month mean to you, Lisbeth and Kimi? Yeah.
I guess for myself, it is a recognition of the role women play in our society because women are really overlooked and kind of the unsung heroes.
Mm-hmm.
back in the day when I was getting more involved, kind of the slogan that we used to hear a lot was "Women hold up half the sky," and that was a something that was said by Mao Zedong in China. But it really resonated, I think, with a lot of people because it really recognized the equal role that women play, but is not recognized in society. And so I think that's something that um, a lot of my women friends have really tried to, uphold. And in a lot of the groups that I've worked in, it's actually the women who are the leadership and the ones who
Mm-hmm.
take kind of a leading role in doing a lot of the work. So I think having Women's History Month is really important and something that needs to be more broadened in terms of people actually celebrating it and recognizing it as a really
Mm-hmm.
important holiday or month to be celebrated.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. And I feel like, yeah, Women's History Month, to have a dedicated month is like we can solely focus on uplifting women and all of the labor and all of the love that we pour out to society that is often, yeah, like you said, overlooked or not acknowledged. Um, yeah, women are often just maybe doing the background work or holding it down for their families, but not really recognized. So I agree with you, and I hope that this Women's a month we can do more of that, just highlighting powerful women.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like you said, women are seen to be in the background and like a supporting aspect of a family unit or like a workplace or any kind of, group of people. But in reality, that is so powerful that it gets overlooked so much. Without women upholding and maintaining and sustaining, a family unit, for example, it can't function. So I hope that this month also we can all recognize the women in our lives and really uplift that. And I try to make it a point to, for example, like thank my mother, thank my sisters for existing and for being like examples of what strong women are like. I know that as immigrant women, there's also additional challenges that go into living as a woman, as an immigrant woman. So I'm curious to know how have you seen immigrant women win in the past, or what would you like people to know about immigrant women?
I think for me, the first thing I think about is my mom. She's like the example of an immigrant woman. She's so strong, and she migrated to this country solely because of me, because I was born, and she knew that I wouldn't have the childhood or the future that she envisioned for me if she didn't migrate. And unfortunately, there's a lot of socioeconomic issues in our home countries, and so she was forced to migrate. But once she came to the United States, she hustled, she worked, she took care of me and my siblings. My mom was even involved in all of the like parent committees in our schools. Despite the language barrier, she like took me to my first protest. Like she is
That's so
like
cool.
the example of an immigrant woman. So she was also a street vendor. She not only sold like food and yogurt, but she sold like toilet paper, and she would make profit off of that. She would take me with her. So she showed me so much about what it is to be an immigrant person in the States, but at the same time having to be loving and caring and nurturing. Like I just think that's amazing to be able to do both things. And despite all of the challenges that she faced, I still think she is very free spirited and not very much in the mold of like a quiet, like supportive, like wife. I think
Not
she's
like a
like
very like submissive.
submissive. She's very like outspoken and strong. I mean, most of our staff have met her, and they know how she is. But I love that about her, and I think that's where I get like a lot of my characteristics from. So
And your mommy makes the best chicken tacos.
Oh,
I think I told her, I was like, I am
yeah,
not usually a fan of chicken tacos for some reason,
yeah.
but I really like your mom's, and she is really
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like she started her own business. She registered by herself with the state, and then when she found out there was other resources, she was really happy and she continued that journey. So I'm very proud of her.
So if you could describe your mom, or an immigrant woman in like one word or two words, what would that be?
I would say resilient
Yeah,
for sure. That's like the perfect word, I think, to describe immigrant women.
that's
Because
awesome.
yeah, at this, like I said, at the same time that they're working hard and they're pouring so much love, they have to face all these systemic issues. They
Hmm.
have to face even racism, So to still keep strong and to still be able to take care of your family, and at the same time, you know, on the day to day have to face all these systemic issues like racism, like, like discrimination, that is beyond amazing to me.
Well, that's definitely, an immigrant woman winning. And I think
Yeah.
carrying that legacy in you, and you carrying that legacy with your children, that's really cool to see.
Hmm.
So how about you, Kimmy? What would you say? How have you seen immigrant women win in the past, or what would you want people to know about immigrant women?
Um, I really like that story. It kind of reminds me of my grandmother on my mom's side. All my grandparents were immigrants because I'm third generation in this country. But my grandmother immigrated to this country in, I believe, 1922. And she came with her husband, and then soon after had my mother and my two other aunts. But she had a very hard life too because her husband died when my mom was only 12. And so she had to raise three daughters on her own. And my mother had to go to work when she was like 15 years old and become like a schoolgirl, which is when back then, um, she would go to someone's house and actually live with the family and do household chores and things. It's basically child labor. I don't think that would be allowed today, but back then that's what people did because they had to survive. But my grandmother also had to go to camp, during World War II, the concentration camps that put Japanese Americans into camp on the West Coast and Hawaii. So she was, a single mother with three daughters going to camp to a
Oh.
situation that was completely unknown. They had no idea where they were going, how long they would be there, what the conditions would be, which were horrible. When they first
Mhm.
went, they were in uh, staying in a horse stall at Tanforan Racetrack in San Francisco, and then later were sent to Topaz, Utah, and were there for I think close to 3.5, 4 years
Mhm.
before they were released. But for everyone who went to camp, it was such a hardship. But particularly for a single mom with three daughters to have to go through that by herself
Mhm.
was, I think, really hard. Um, Afterwards, they eventually went back to Berkeley, and she was able to continue to support her family and her daughters. And I think that she was also very resilient. That would be
Yeah.
the word that I would use as well, is being
Yeah.
resilient after
Oh.
going through such hardship.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
But there's also a couple other examples I wanted to give about
of
immigrant women.
course. Yeah.
Um, these are like Chinese garment workers. So back in July of 1974, which is almost 50 years ago, these Chinese immigrant women workers, 135 of them, went out on strike in San Francisco Chinatown. And they went out on strike because they were trying to get a union and get better working conditions and better pay. And this was at the Zhongsai factory in San Francisco. It was owned by this person named Douglas Tompkins, and they produced sportswear for this company called Esprit de Corps, which was known for its sportswear. but the conditions that these garment workers worked under was really horrible. Like they would have these speed ups, they wouldn't allow breaks, they had to work 10 to 12-hour days. And one of the worst violations that they were known for was that they had daily rationing of toilet paper.
Oh my God.
where the guy would only provide 2 rolls of toilet paper for 135 workers.
Wow.
And for a woman, especially,
Yeah.
that is so
Yeah.
wrong on so many levels.
Not enough.
So, anyways, they went out on strike, and after 2 days after the walkout, the owner closed the factory, just closed it down. And even one of the drivers that worked for the owner hit several of the protesters with a car and refused to call an ambulance until he was forced to. So the strike got a lot of publicity and support from the surrounding community as well as throughout the Bay Area. And students and workers from all over came to support them. And eventually, in December of 1975, a judge ordered that Tompkins and Esprit de Corps had to reopen the factory and then give the workers back pay. So that was a victory.
That's a huge win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took 4 years before they finally got their settlement because the company tried to do all kinds of legal maneuvers to avoid paying them. But eventually they did settle. So that was really a significant strike.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think in when it comes to labor movements and, throughout history, we see a lot of times women leading these movements and not getting the recognition and not getting the recognition in the history books and the recognition and, even within our field where we're talking so much about social justice often, like I didn't know about that particular strike, right? But it's such a significant moment in history and such a big win. Like they shut it down and then they reopened it with back pay, with added amenities, just basic rights that they were able to get working together. And it's an amazing story that we don't often hear about.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important, like this History Month and all of the Women's History Month, to really celebrate the diversity amongst women, because we don't have one specific role that we need to be, shaped into, but there's so many different like avenues that women take, and we need to celebrate all of them. Like an example that comes up listening to the story is like, who's writing the history books? It's usually men, and
White men.
need white men. Yeah. And we do need more women, that are historians. So I think that's super important, that it's not only, women who have families or care for families. It's also women who are career driven, that have these different roles and sometimes even still have family. So I think, that says a lot, and we need to support as much as we can women in leadership. I think that's super important.
And uplifting these kinds of stories and make it known that women have been organizing and leading movements for decades, for hundreds of years, for as long as we've existed. I think women have this, this particular sense of unity and fairness that I think it's part of being, part of being in the background, I think, a lot of the times, and not getting credit for the work that we do. But yeah, I think in every story that I hear about so far about like what we consider a win for a female or for a woman, everything I hear about is fairness for themselves and for others, and it's working as a unit and seeking like equal treatment.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, Kimi. Is there any other examples of immigrant women winning that you want to share with us?
Yeah, there's one other one that's a little more recent. This is a story about the Domestic Workers United, DWU.
Oh, yeah.
This is a Black immigrant-led grassroots racial justice organization of Caribbean, African, and Latinx domestic workers in New York. And it was founded in the year 2000. And then in 2010, the DWU helped pass the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights in New York. And it was the first legislation of that type in the U.S. Since 2015, the DWU is 100% worker-led by and for immigrants who work as nannies, elder care workers, and house cleaners. And they provide Know Your Rights sessions, worker town halls, food justice, community-supported agriculture like CSA distribution for its members, healing retreats, arts and cultural activities, healthcare and health insurance access, as well as legal advocacy and support. So I think it's great, that it's an immigrant-led union for domestic workers and does so much for that community.
Yeah, that's amazing. We need to duplicate that everywhere.
Yeah, really.
That's really cool. If it's okay, I want to share also an example of women winning that I can think about. As you're sharing these stories, I think of two things. I think about the Zapatista women in Mexico, Comandante Ramona, and she's so badass. And I remember her watching her on TV when I was a kid, and just hearing the most erroneous things being said about her and all the other Zapatista men and women who led that movement, but women were very strong leaders in that and still are in that movement. And I also think about Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, the two trans women that initiated and sparked the Stonewall riots in the 60s, right? I think that, these two examples for me are incredibly misjudged in history, and took me a long time to really understand the real background and real history and facts with with these stories. But it just makes me think of all these other women that have been obscured by history and been negated the wins that they have actually provided for all kinds of communities. But yeah, as you mention all these things, as you talk about your mom, Lizbeth, and as you talk about your family history, Kimi, I in all these other examples, again, it just continues to show me how strong and resilient women are throughout history. And it makes me feel really, really proud to be a woman and to be able to be surrounded by strong women. So thank you so much for sharing those things. I'm sure that we could talk about other women forever.
Yeah.
But we can leave it at that because those are some great examples. But as we close out, we're continuing to fight for immigrant rights, and we are continuing to fight for women's rights. Are there any closing thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with us?
I guess for myself, I think it's really important that we recognize Women's History Month. And I think especially in light of what's been happening in this country about reproductive rights and the lack of access that women have to getting abortions, how that's, these rights are under attack. And, so I think that it's so important that people really recognize the struggle that women have gone through. And the fact that the clocks are being turned backwards, like with the Roe versus Wade being reversed and this whole rightward trend that's really harming women and families. And so I think it's really important that we really step it up.
Yeah, that's super important and really sad to see, especially like as a new mom and thinking about my daughter and her future and the options that she possibly will or will not have. It's really scary to think about. So you're right. I think that's one of our most pressing issues as women, that we fight for the ability to make decisions for ourselves. It's such a basic thing, right? And it's like under threat. So yeah.
I think we could have a whole podcast on that issue alone.
Yeah.
So, you feel free to come back and talk to us about that, Kimi, because I don't even want to get started because it's so infuriating. It's enraging. And, let's have another episode on this.
Yeah, I think I also read recently that the Alabama courts ruled that an embryo
is a child.
Life is
like
a child.
Yeah.
That is so insane.
I love the memes that are attached to it. Like, so can I start charging? Can I start deducting it from my taxes right away?
Yeah.
If I freeze an embryo, can I claim it as a dependent? Like,
it's not only that, it's like such a contradiction because
Yep.
these same people want you to have families.
Yeah.
But then people that are going through IVF, now they're, if it doesn't work for them, then they're going to be persecuted. Like, that makes no sense.
It's really an attack
It is.
against women, and it's an attack on same-sex couples, and it's an attack on just our autonomy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's wrong on so many levels. And for me, it's very personal because both of my kids are IVF. And, originally when I got pregnant, I had 18 embryos.
Wow.
And I had at least, I don't know, a dozen of them frozen. And my daughter is the result of frozen embryos.
Wow.
So, so it's very personal to me when I heard this thing. And I don't know, it's just, I can't believe that they're taking it this far.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it also, there's so many contradictions in what the folks pushing this narrative and these laws, and what they say. And I think a lot about the women who were given hysterectomies in detention and the fact that there wasn't enough outcry for that. It enrages me because one, not only are they facing detention, they're immigrant women in detention, facing these horrible conditions, facing oppression, probably violence and abuse. But on top of that, medical professionals that they trusted gave them hysterectomies. And I know that the lawsuits are still ongoing, but I hope that they can at least get a fraction of relief that they deserve, and I don't think anything will ever give them, healing from that because that's so traumatic. But it makes me think, like, where was the government in all of this, right? And where was these states that claim that they're all for families and having children, but then at the same time support the people that put these policies into place that create this mess?
Forcible sterilization.
Yeah.
That at a young age creates additional hormonal imbalances on women that then need to go dependent on hormonal treatments, such as birth control, which is now also, under threat. And so it's like a whole vicious cycle of just let us live. Let us exist, damn it.
Yeah, so for Women's History Month is like, let's celebrate the existence of women.
Because there's been a lot of effort to suppress, oppress, and diminish the existence of women.
Yeah.
And we're still here, and we're still kicking, and we're winning, right?
Yeah. We need to have more visibility.
And we're the majority.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's just so much power. Just that, we can produce humans, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not a mother. I can't say that. I think it's one of those things that I just find immensely fascinating and intimidating. So, yeah.
And even if we couldn't produce,
we're still women.
We're still women.
We can still raise children. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess my point is we are still such an integral part of society.
Yeah, for sure.
And such an integral part of family units, whether it's adopted children, whether it's
your chosen family.
Chosen family, women have, at least in my life, have been the leaders of our family.
Yes.
The backbone of our family. Even though in Mexican culture, it's still very machista culture. Even my dad knows, like, and mom says what's going to, like his mom, will say what goes. And so, yeah. So thank you, Lizbeth, and thank you, Kimi, for being here. Make sure you follow us on our social media to keep up with our following episodes and conversations during Women's History Month and onward. Happy Women's Month to everybody, and celebrate the women around you. Uplift the struggles and be an ally and be an active member of the fight for equal women's rights.